everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Kellen Curry, a Republican challenging George Santos in the New York primary. Kellen, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks so much for having me.
Of course, I want to dive into a few things today, starting with comparing your campaign to the incumbent Congressman George Santos. It was widely reported in the first quarter of this year that his campaign lost around $3,000. You just reported some new numbers that you raised over $200,000 in the first 3 months since announcing. Why do you think there's such a disparity here?
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, I'm just extremely proud of my small but mighty team. We rolled up our sleeves. We did what we had to do. We wanted to make sure that we got off to a very strong start. But I think it goes back to who we are. We're running on restoring honest leadership. It's what the American people deserve, and it's what resonated with people all across the country. We got donations not only from right here in our backyard, but from 10 states away, and it was casting our vision and our message, and it resonated with a lot of people, and so they wanted to be supportive, and I'm so appreciative of their support to get our campaign started off on the right.
I want to talk specifically about that message you're talking about. You said this when announcing the fundraising number. People resonate with our message of sticking to kitchen table issues that matter to families and not getting caught up with other distractions taking place. So before we get into that, I do want to know, when you're talking with constituents, when you're talking to New Yorkers, are they bringing up George Santos?
Actually, no. Most folks are ready to move beyond George Santos. I think they get it. They understand that he's very much an aberration. They're tired of not having a effective member of Congress, and so they're ready for what comes next. And so we're talking about kitchen table issues. We're talking about how we can make life more affordable here on Long Island. We're talking about national security issues. We're talking about increasing federal funding for our Merchant Marine Academy, which is located right here in Kings Point, right here in the district, and has a very important role to play in terms of our national and economic security.
Let's talk about those kitchen table issues. According to a recent poll, these are the top issues that are what many Americans consider most important to them: inflation and prices, jobs in the economy, and healthcare. What's your pitch to the people of your district when it comes to these issues?
Absolutely. So on inflation, we have to send more members of Congress who understand the economy. Inflation is coming down, and so a lot of that has to do, I think, with the Republican majority that we have that's been putting pressure on the Democrats, that's been putting pressure on the Biden administration. We saw that during the debt ceiling deal. And so that's been helpful. I think that's been a positive influence for inflation, because I think it sends the right message to the market that prices can come down, because we've got in place a divided government that's going to be consistent and that's going to be focused on bringing down the cost of goods all across the country, so more families are not pushed to the margins. Some of the other issues you mentioned, particularly on the job front, the economy is beginning to create more jobs, but we have to stay focused on economic growth. And I think to the extent that we can continue to do that, then we can prevent a recession. Some economists are still calling for a recession, but right now we're kind of on that tip. So we'll see which way it goes. But to the extent that we can make sure we avoid another recession, I think is directly related to us sending more members of Congress who have the ability to lead on the issue of economic security. I certainly have that, having worked on Wall Street for a number of years.
President Biden and his administration has touted historic job growth. So how would you contribute to that? Because from his perspective, he's saying, hey, Democrats are doing a good job on this.
Yeah, from his perspective, they're doing a good job because they're using so much of the power of government to do it. I think there's a lifeline on that. I think we have to get back to using the power of the free market to do it. And I think that's where we're at our best in this country in terms of growing the economy, but growing it sustainably. And that's the key. And so that's the difference between my approach and this administration's approach.
Like you said, you are a former vice president at JP Morgan. So how specifically do you grow the economy sustainably?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we have to reduce the regulation burden on the American economy. One example is in the shipping industry. So many of those jobs, so many of that manufacturing capability, so much of that American industrial capability has gone overseas. over the last few decades. And so we have to work to bring more of those jobs back. In fact, 90% of the ships that come in and out of American ports are manned by foreign crews. And that's because the regulatory burden on shipping companies to operate in this country is so high and it's so expensive. And so we have to do more on the regulatory front to ease the burden on these companies to operate. And the shipping industry is just one example.
I do now want to turn a little bit to news of the week, and that is back to George Santos. He did compare himself to Rosa Parks earlier this week. What do you make of that comparison?
Well, listen, that comparison did not sit well with me and with so many others. You know, Rosa Parks was a woman who led with extraordinary grace and dignity and courage. She was from Montgomery, Alabama, the same place that my 94-year-old grandmother is from. And as a black kid growing up in this country, you hear the stories of what it was like to grow up in the civil rights movement, what it was like to grow up, in that era, especially for black Americans. And so for him to misuse and to misappropriate the legacy of Rosa Parks was hurtful not only to black Americans, but quite frankly to every American who has benefited directly or indirectly from the legacy of Rosa Parks. And so it's just another reminder that we need to elect more members who are less worried about themselves and more worried about servant leadership. And I've demonstrated that over the course of my life, serving in the government, serving in the military, serving in youth organizations across the country. And I look forward to bringing that spirit of service into Congress and into this campaign.
Congressman Santos did make those comments when he was criticizing Senator Mitt Romney's call for him to resign. Do you echo those calls? Do you want George Santos to resign?
Oh, absolutely. I think he should have resigned months ago. I mean, the people here are not getting served. I mean, everything from constituency services, and we talk about restoring the gold standard and achieving the gold standard of constituency services. That's not being done right now in this district. It's being done by a neighboring congressman, and that's not fair to the American people. And so we have to make sure that we restore this office, number one, with trust and with honesty, and with somebody who we can believe in to actually do the job. And right now, the job is not getting done. We have the most ineffective member of Congress in the country in George Santos.
Kellen, we have months to go before the primary election. What's next for your campaign?
Absolutely. Well, as you know, as a first-time candidate, the fundraising never stops. And so we have to continue to raise money so that we have the resources to compete. We have to continue to get around the district and connect with leaders, with constituents, with residents, with families. And so, look, it's early. That work continues. We look forward to the summer months and the early fall of getting out there, knocking on doors, being more of a presence. But it's coming together. I'm so happy about the progress that we've made in the short time that we've been a campaign. It accrues very well for what comes next, and I'm very excited about the next steps of our campaign.
Kellen Curry, thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me.